He's going to come in after me and give a little bit more of a talk about next steps and plans. But my objective today is to talk about the law and the law in relation to your rights in protesting. We know that the police, the Crown Prosecution Service have become more heavy-handed as of late in relation to those who have been protesting. So what I want to do is go through a step-by-step guide as to your entitlements, what you can and cannot do. Now, let me premise this with probably quite obvious comments that any of you who have your own lawyers, any of you who may have been arrested and are facing charges in the magistrate's court, your lawyer, listen to your own legal advice from your lawyer. What I'm going to say now does not in any way, should not be seen as taking the place of those that you've already instructed to be your representatives. In fact, I'm going to be slightly more talking objectively about your rights as opposed to any one individual's particular circumstances. Anyone wants to come and see me afterwards, I'm more than happy to talk to them, or if there's any specific questions, of course, in the Q&A session later, more than happy to answer. Now, I want to start off by saying that the history of activism in this country over the last 200 years has been the history of protest and the history of development in relation to community activism, in relation to the growing and the receiving of working class rights and industry and health and safety law for the last 200 years. And really, the protest movement and the rights of the working classes and communities within our great cities go hand in hand. And it wasn't that long ago, well, I say that long ago relatively, about 30 miles away in Manchester, I think just over 200 years ago, that we had the Peterloo protests, where thousands came out on the streets and were beaten down. In those days, in fact, it's now referred to as the Peterloo Massacre, because the amount of working class people that died trying to get political representation and political rights. But what a lot of people don't realise, that after that, Parliament introduced laws, greater laws, to ensure that protests did not take place, that meetings like this did not happen. And so the struggle continued even though many people died. And indeed, up until recently in the 80s, when we had the miners' strike and the strikers that used to be beaten down by police officers, and the bloodied bodies that remained after strikes and protesters protecting their minds, not far from here, the legislation that was introduced then by Thatcher, but by successive governments since, to prevent people from protesting, is that same legislation that's being used today. Those that were arrested only weeks ago were arrested under legislation that was introduced by Margaret Thatcher to prevent miners' strikes and protests outside of mines, preventing the scabs from coming in. So, that very legislation is what people are now being arrested under, be it fracking, be it environmental protests, and be it protests that are taking up just up the road at Warris Quarry. And so this fight that we've been having now for decades, for hundreds of years, is a fight that continues, and it's a fight that we keep on being beaten back, and we've had to stand up and continue to fight. And some of you here may never have got themselves in politics or involved in politics. And I use the word politics not from a Labour or Tory perspective, but politics from a community activism, from getting involved, because you've not really maybe been impacted by it. It's only because now it's at the end of your street, or it's at the end of your road, or it's at the end of the high street, that it's come on your plate and that you've decided to do something. And for the first time, you're finding yourself being stopped for what you've always thought has been a legitimate right and a right to protest. And so what I want to do is explain to you what you can and cannot do. And to start off with, you can protest. You have the right to protest. All right? That is a right not only that has been developed within English law, but dare I say it, it is a European Convention right that you're entitled to grab as your own right under Article 11 of the European Charter and the European Convention of Human Rights. Says you can protest and no one can stop you from protesting. What is happening is that when industries or when the police or when the prosecution service want to stop you, they start looking for laws that are available at the end of their fingertips to try and prevent you from doing something. So, a classic example is an obstruction of a police constable. Well, what does that mean? Well, effectively, it means that if a police constable says that you're in their way, or you're not moving on, or you're not giving your name and address, or you're not doing what they are commanding you to do, then you can be arrested for obstruction of a police constable. It is a power that has been there that you often find, for example, in situations where people are pouring out of pubs and there's a fight going on and the police officer's trying to get involved and someone's not being nice to the police officer, so they're nicked for obstructing a PC. But they're using that power to prevent people from protesting. Another power that's commonly used is the law under criminal damage. Well, what is criminal damage? Well, you might think, if I pick up this table and break it over here, then I've damaged the table. But in fact, criminal damage is so wide now that simply by putting a piece of chalk and putting it on a pavement can be considered to be criminal damage. So you can be arrested for criminal damage. The law that some of you have been arrested under, I've already mentioned, the Trade Union Relations, Labour Relations Act law, that basically says if you obstruct someone from carrying out their workplace environment. So simply, if you prevent a lorry from going in, and a lot of the environmental campaigners across the country, the frackers, have been caught under that because, of course, they're trying to block trucks going into landfills just like this, or try and prevent people from fracking in their local area. They've been nicked and been prosecuted under that piece of legislation. Now, I'm not, as a barrister, going to say to you that you should be going out and breaking the law. In fact, don't break the law. Absolutely, you shouldn't be breaking the law. But the difficulty is, as I've said, is knowing where that line is that allows you to peacefully protest, which is your inalienable right, and not to be arrested. Right? And so what I'm going to talk about is not being arrested, but then what happens if you are arrested? What do you do? Okay, so as I said, you can protest. You can stand outside any building with a card, with a placard. You can shout, you can scream, you can use loudspeakers, you can hand out leaflets and petitions. There is nothing stopping you from doing that, right? But If you want to march, so you'll go from the quarry, you're going to march to the town hall, then you can't do that without giving the police notice. Right? You have to give them 6 days notice that you're going to march. There's a form that you have to fill in. They're not going to stop you. The whole idea is that they can police the roads if you're going down the road and prevent any problems and accidents and all the rest of it and congestion that may take place. But you have to give them a notice, at least 6 days notice. There are exceptions to that. For example, if something happens tomorrow and you want to do something on Tuesday and it's all very quick, then you can speed up the process. But in short, you have to give them notice that you are going to go on a march. That's really one of the only exceptions. The other exception is stopping people from doing, people from working in that environment. Again, this came in to prevent those disrupting those scabs that were coming into the mines and working in the mines while people were out on strike. And when that piece of legislation was introduced, they were being, effectively, miners were being nicked for trying to stop the coaches. I don't know if you all remember the coaches that came in and preventing the coaches, trying to stop the coaches from coming in with the striking scabs on board. But they were nicked under that. You don't damage anything, right? Simple as that. You don't damage anything. You don't give the police any excuse. So you don't rip up a fence, or you don't put paint on something. You know, there's the Extinction Rebellion you may have seen throwing paint all over the place. You don't do that. That's criminal damage. Not that I'm suggesting that you're going to do that, but you don't give the police any excuse to be able to arrest you. All right? That's simply it when it comes to this type of protest. In effect, you just don't give them an excuse to arrest you. Now, the other thing that you need to know is that being arrested is not just about prosecuting you for a crime that they suspect that you committed. It's about collecting your data, your name, your address, your mobile number, your DNA, your fingerprints maybe. Well, fingerprints definitely, DNA maybe, when you're taken down in the police station. All that goes onto a database. So it's about collecting data from you. So again, being arrested may mean that you might want to say, I'm not going to give you my name and address. Now, my advice is that you cooperate, because frankly, to do not so, they're the people with the keys, they're the people with the cars, they're the people with the cells. They're going to make life a bit harder for you. But you have a right, as any individual has a right, not to tell a police officer your name and address. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But there will be consequences from that. For example, if a police officer wants to give you a penalty notice for doing something, you refuse to give them your name and address, and they can't give it to you, then you can be arrested for it. And then it will take longer for you to be released if you don't give them your name and address. But still, that is your right if you don't want to, if you want to be difficult, frankly. Now, when it comes to being arrested, now I can't say this clear enough, and if there is one thing that you take away from this meeting, if you are arrested, do not say anything. Do not make a comment. When you go to the police station, you do not make a comment until you have a lawyer with you. Every person who is arrested is entitled to free legal advice. You do not pay for it. You're arrested, you get it. You might wait an hour or so you sit down in your little cell, you open up a magazine, and you just wait. but you do not do anything unless you have a lawyer with you. I'm a barrister. I've been a barrister for 25 years. I've worked in the United States in the death penalty. I've worked in the Middle East doing international human rights. I've worked here in this country on miscarriages of justice. I know my rights. But I am ever arrested, I would not do anything until I get a lawyer with me. Absolutely not. Doesn't matter how much you think you know, how much you think you're innocent. This is a good one. I've got nothing to hide, so why not talk? No. Remember one thing, and I'm sorry if there are any police officers in this room, or if there's any people here who are relatives of police officers, they are not your friends. All right? They're not your friends. As much as they want to be nice to you and give you a nice cup of tea and have a little chat with you, they're not your friends. They're there to prosecute. All right? And so you do not say a word until you have a solicitor with you. Now, once you've got a solicitor with you, you will be interviewed most likely. Your solicitor will advise you on the best course of action during that interview. Sometimes it is to provide an explanation. You're arrested because you were sitting in front of the gates and the truck didn't go before you. You can say, well, actually, I've got the film here that shows I wasn't sitting in front of the gates, and therefore you've got the wrong person. And here's the evidence. You might want to do that. You might want to save it because they're not going to take any notice of you and wait for it to happen later on in court. So you might want to go no comment in your interview. I would say, as I said, as a criminal defence barrister, I've done hundreds of trials. I would say about 70% of the people I represent go no comment in their interview. So it's common that people just don't say it because at the end of the day, they have the burden of proving it on you. Now, as you will be advised by your solicitor, because you won't be doing anything without a solicitor present, there are consequences of going no comment. It could be used against you later in a trial situation. That's why it's important for a solicitor to be there. The other reason why it's important for you to have a solicitor present is when you're arrested and the police officers want to interview you, they don't have to tell you what they're going to ask you or indeed highlight the topic areas of they want to say to you in that interview and question you. So everything will be done by surprise. You'll be sitting there and they'll be saying, we've got that picture of you. And you have no idea. They will ambush you. But if you have a lawyer, they are obliged under the law to tell your lawyer what it is, effectively topic areas that they're going to ask you in your interview. And so the lawyer can then come and speak to you and advise you as to the way that you should go forward. But if you don't have one, you don't get anything. You're ambushed in that interview. That's another reason why you should have a lawyer. The other thing, remember I talked about the benefit effectively to the police and to the prosecution service of arresting you is that data collection. Well, there's another thing that they do as well. Bail conditions. All right? This is a condition when you are released from a police station, even if you're not charged with an offence, because they haven't made a decision, so they're bailing you over to another date, effectively, to go back to the police station. They can put conditions on that prevent you from going into the area around the protest. So effectively, through the back door, they're able to prevent protests from taking place simply by those bail conditions. I think one or two of those that are here today who have been arrested have those very bail conditions on them. That means that they can't go back and go to any protest at the moment until this matter is resolved. And that brings us on to the third thing, going to court. Don't be scared of going to court. Your first hearing at court will be probably 15 minutes. All you have to decide is whether you're going guilty or not guilty. Now again, by this time, you're going to have a lawyer with you. You're not doing this on your own, right? If you qualify for legal aid, then of course it's all free, all right? So you'll have a lawyer with you, you'll be advised, you'll know what you're going to do before you walk into that courtroom if you're pleading guilty or not guilty, okay? If you are pleading guilty, then you'll probably be sentenced there and then, frankly. If you're pleading not guilty, you will have a trial. The trial itself won't last that long. 2-3 hours, that's it. It's not going to be a big trial, right? You know, I've done trials which go on for 3 months. So, you know, there are long trials. This one won't. It will be a couple of hours, effectively. And you will be able, through your lawyer, to cross-examine the police officers that say, I saw you do this. And you say, no, you didn't. Here's the evidence to say that I didn't do this. And then you will give evidence, if you want to say they've got the wrong person or they're making this up, effectively. And the magistrate will then decide. Now, if you are found guilty, if you plead guilty, right, on that first day, what's the sort of sentence that you will receive? Now, under the law that those that have been arrested so far, under that law, it's a fine, effectively. The 2 cases that I know about, which are the fracking under that law, one got a conditional discharge, which is pretty much the lowest sentence you can receive, which is go away and don't do it again, effectively, sentence. If you do, then you're going to breach this conditional discharge. So the condition being you can't go away, you can't do this again type thing. That's the first one. The second one will be a fine. A fine's a means tested. So if you're a very wealthy person with a very nice car and a very big house, you might get a slightly bigger fine. If you have no money, then it's addressed. So it's a 50 quid fine, effectively. Maybe a £100 fine that you're going to receive. If you have a trial, it might be slightly higher fine. But that's a territory that we're in relation to this. Because remember, you might think that the reason why this is happening is not the public interest of the ultimate sentence, but to stop communities from protesting, stop individuals from protesting. So the question you have to ask yourself, and I've been on many protests throughout the years, both in this country, in America, and indeed in the Middle East. I've done many protests, all right? And when you walk into the protest, when you get off the bus or when you go down the street, you have to ask yourself, are you ready for the consequences if you are arrested, all right? Now when I say consequence, are you ready for the consequences? It doesn't mean that you go out and you break the law. I've never been arrested on protests, and I've been on many, many protests, all right? But if I was arrested, then I'll be ready for it, frankly, because I know that the level of arrest, the level of my culpability would be incredibly low, because I wouldn't get myself into doing anything more serious. So there's things like, for example, violent disorder. If you remember during the Orgreave strike there, a lot of the picketers were arrested and put on trial for violent disorder. I mean, it had an enormous impact upon the miners from a mental health point of view. There's some great films and documentaries on Orgreave. These people, these men, were willing to go out there and do it because of what they felt was the right thing to do. And they were put on trial. And those trials lasted months. and then they collapsed, the trial collapsed, and they were all found not guilty. But they spent a lot of time in prison waiting for it, and a lot of mental health damage as a result to those workers. You're not in that league, don't get me wrong, but again, you know, they suffered the consequences of going out and legitimately protesting for what they felt were their rights, their lives, and their livelihoods. So I think I've covered all bases. I've got a list here of the types of offences that you can be, I've got my class, there they are, that you can be charged with. And I'll briefly go through them, and I'll briefly tell you what the sentences are if I may. So, obstruction of a highway. Obstruction of a highway. So let's say it's not getting the truck into the preventing the workers from going into work, but it's effectively that you're stopping cars from going past. Obstruction of a highway. Maximum penalty, a fine, £1,000 fine, right? But you're not going to get that because it's means tested. So generally, it's about £200 fine, or maybe less, or a conditional discharge, that very low sentence. Criminal damage. Remember I talked about the chalk on the pavement? Well, that depends upon the amount of damage that's caused. So there's protesters, for example, those that have been campaigning against the arms industry. There were 2 campaigners that climbed over the fence at an RAF base and destroyed I think it was a tornado or an F-16 or something like that. Thousands and thousands of pounds worth of damage. If it's over £5,000, then you go to Crown Court and the sentence can be a lot higher and it can be imprisonment. But if you're putting chalk on the pavement or something like that, then it's less than £5,000 and the penalty, as I say, maximum 3 months imprisonment, but you're not going to get that. It's a fine, effectively, or a conditional discharge. Obstructing a police officer, again, a fine, maximum 1 month in custody, but you're not in that territory, effectively, at all. So again, it's a fine. Section 241 of the Trade Unions and Labour Relations Act, the one that's been applied here, again, conditional discharge or a fine. Section 12 of the Public Order Act, so public order offences, effectively, again, a fine. Aggravated trespass, that's climbing over your fence, a fine. Generally under 500. Can you see where I'm going here? That the issue here is really not the sentencing. It's not what goes into the courtroom and the trial. This is all about preventing you from protesting. This is all about stopping legitimate protests. So, my advice is this. 1, protest. 2, don't obstruct police officers. Don't obstruct the highway. Don't cause criminal damage. If you're going to march, give them notice. Be nice to your police officers, even if they're not nice to you. And protest and shout. I've stood outside Downing Street and I've got a loudspeaker and I've screamed my voice off across at Downing Street. Shout, protest, signs, leaflets, petitions. Don't cross that line, because as soon as you do, you give them an excuse. But if you do, then you get yourself a lawyer free of charge at the police station. You don't make a comment until your lawyer tells you to do so, and don't worry about court. And that's the final thing. I'm a barrister, mainly work in London. I live up here in Stoke. If you are on trial for any charge, and you want me to represent you, I will do so free of charge. No problem at all. So, you need help, I'll be there. If anyone wants my mobile number, they can have it. All right? If anyone wants to sit down, have a cup of tea and have a chat, they can have it. All right? You will have your own solicitor. You need to speak to your own solicitor. But if you want me to be your barrister, you tell the solicitor, they'll instruct me and I'll be there. All right? No problem at all. So, I think that's the end of the law lecture, if I can call it that. Before I hand over to Andrew, are there any questions that you have of me?
Yeah, I'd like to, you know, you said about if you're arrested, you don't have to give them your name and address.
Yeah.
Your fingerprints and your DNA and everything.
Well, no, fingerprints you do.
Okay, but not necessarily your DNA. If you continue to refuse to give them your name and address, will they eventually let you go anyway?
You know, this is a very tricky area. I was actually looking at this last night. It's an ambiguous area. Some argue that they will let you go after a long time of being inside and in the cell. It depends on what you've done. Obviously, if you're charged with murder and you're going to go, I'm not going to give you my name and address, I'm not going to say, okay, you can go now then. So it kind of depends. If you're charged with what they call a summary only light offence, they can't keep you there forever, can they? Because it's a fine. I'm not going to keep you.
I could just.
But if you want to wait out the game, it's obviously easier for you to get a lawyer in and do it all. You don't even have to go for an interview. You can say, I'm not going. Right. Yeah, but I'd advise that you get yourself a lawyer and you follow the advice of a lawyer.
Which would involve giving them your name?
Not necessarily, no.
Right.
Because what would happen is when you arrive at the police station, you've got the custody sergeant there who's booking you in. He'll say, what's your name? And they go, oh, I'm not going to give you my name. I'm not going to give you my address. Then they'll say, well, you know, you'll get all the usual stuff that will come your way. And then he'll say, you're entitled to a lawyer. So, well, I want a lawyer. I say, well, what name should I give them? Tell them my name's Bob. You know, whatever. I'm not saying, I am not encouraging you to do this, all right? I'm not saying that you should lie to the police officers, all right? What I'm saying is that you have certain entitlements as an individual in this country, as a citizen. And it's up to you, but you will make it more harder on yourself.
Okay.
So take a good book with you.
It's not in regards to the protests itself, but I've found a law, and it's under the Offences of Against a Person Act 1861, Section 23.
Yes.
I quote, whoever shall unlawfully or maliciously administer to or cause to be administered to or taken by other person any poison or destructive noxious things, so there as by to endanger the life of such person, or so there as thereby to inflict such person any grievous bodily alarm, should be guilty of felony. Is that not Wally's Quarry are doing to every human person?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things here. I know that offence very well. Normally, it's for people who have given people drugs that they shouldn't be given them. So that's no, I'm with you. The difficulty here, the offence is against the Persons Act, and you are an individual. When you're going against a quarry, you're talking about a corporate body. So which one do you arrest and who do you put on trial for it? And that legislation, I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, applies to individuals that have done something wrong, but not corporate bodies made up of directors and executive. There are other laws, though, that can be used in relation to environmental laws that may go on to criminal offences, and in particular in relation to what products are being put in the ground and the danger to those on the around them. So you're right to identify that law, but I'm not too sure you can sue a court.
Can be used then, so you're saying that which one, you know,
there
which
are
ones?
other laws.
So what other laws are they?
Yeah. Well, here's your problem, all right? You're now talking about a private prosecution, okay? A private prosecution against a corporate body. It costs money, it costs resources, it costs time. Who do you identify? Who do you arrest? Who do you put on who do you put on trial? All these hurdles that are put in your place before you can get there. That you then, if you get there, the government can come in, take over the trial, and drop the case.
Right, so in terms of the abatement notice, the nuisance order,
Yep.
is that not something the council could put forward as a more like a lawful thing across on this?
You're absolutely right. I think the council have been willfully negligent in actually defending and representing your rights completely. And I'm going to hand over to Councillor Andrew Fox-Zura. He can explain how they haven't done it. And again, I don't want to make this political, and I've not done so far. But the fact is that the way that the members of Parliament have failed, frankly, to take this forward and to do something about it, and the facetious and pithy reply from our Prime Minister when challenged about this, that's not good enough. It's not good enough. We've got to be doing more. And so they need to be held to account, frankly. The council, the politicians, the government, they're failing you. Let's go back to your question, back to the law though. You're right. Let's start using other resources in our bag that can be able to prosecute these people for doing this. Now, where that may be, I don't know what it might be, but we're limited in our resources, we're limited in what we can do, and remember, any private prosecution, any challenge to them can be taken over by the government. I've seen it happen. I've done private prosecutions where they come in and just drop it. They can drop it.
In terms of, like you say, finances, could like you say the petitions be the way forward with that, or?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to straightforward campaigning, let me tell you the first thing about any form of campaigning. I've done a lot. The first thing that happens when you start getting campaign is that different groups start arguing amongst each other about what is the best form of action to go forward. I've seen it over and over and over again. And we spend too much time arguing against each other and not enough time focusing on the outside, on who's to get together. So if there's any one thing that I would take away from campaigning groups is don't split. Don't split. Get together, even if you disagree with certain ways and methods, get together and make sure you're speaking with one voice, because you are giving in. You're giving exactly what the establishment, the authority, the quarry wants you to do when you start arguing amongst yourselves. But there are many different methods. There's your petitions, there's your, there's going to your MP's office, outside your MP's office, and saying, why are you doing more for me?
Because you're saying like there's the zero air pollution going on, the campaign. I've noticed that obviously personally from medical health issues that the British Lung Health Association trying to like put forward, there is a campaign, and it does say on there, if you go onto British Lung Foundation, it says to send something to your local MP. So I recommend that everybody goes on there and puts that forward. I've personally done it myself. So it is the National British Lung Foundation. If you go on to the air pollution and say put forward your concerns about local pollution.
They need to be doing a lot more, and you need to be demanding that they do more. And you're right, that's one of the methods.
Well, thank you, Mark. We're all appreciative for coming along and the offer of free advice and legal representation. First of all, I'd like to know the position regarding the Supreme Court Justice ruling on the arms fair protesters. They were charged under the Trades Union Act 241 and also the obstruction of the highways. There has been lots of cases thrown out also
Yeah.
because of the Ziegler.
Yeah.
And I'm led to believe that down at the Wally's Quarry, they're allowing us to protest for 2 hours for the first couple of days. And then that was because of the Ziegler ruling under the old judgment from the High Court, and then it went to the Supreme Court. Can you explain what is the area with the Ziegler versus Director of Public Prosecutions,
Yeah,
please?
I mean, what was happening was that the prosecution authorities were using this legislation. It was actually, I think, under a different section of the legislation, because it was a much more serious part than what people are being arrested and prosecuted on here. And it's been getting short shrift. They've been doing it recently with the Extinction Rebellion protesters as well. They've been getting short shrift from the courts for using the wrong piece of legislation and a hammer coming down to break a small nut, basically. But it was more than that, because I started off by talking about Article 11 of the European Convention of Human Rights, which is your right to protest. And anything that is being used that can prevent your legitimate right of protest, for example, the wrong use of the trade union legislation, has been seen by the courts over many years now as being unlawful and against the convention right. Now, you talk about in relation to limiting your right to protest to 2 hours or 3 hours. That arguably is wrong. Arguably, you are entitled to protest. Remember the Greenham Common? And, you know, they stayed there and they lived there and they didn't go anywhere. Now, I'm not suggesting you go and pitch up a tent and live there, but that's what they did. They didn't say to the Greenham Common women, you've only got 2 hours. You can stay there. And that's your legitimate right to protest. And this is what the issues have been dealt with in the Supreme Court, as you rightly outlined, in relation to the tension between your convention right and your right to protest. But it's more than that, as you've identified, the use of laws that are not appropriate and applicable for the type of protesting that's going on today. And over again, we've had victories. And those that have been arrested have had their convictions quashed or thrown out, as was the case in the Supreme Court. And that brings me back to another thing, which I should have mentioned earlier. When you are arrested, when you go before the court, you might want to have an experienced protest solicitor representing you. So someone whose job it is protests. Now, we've got some very good lawyers in Newcastle and in Stoke that would be able to represent you, but they're general criminal lawyers. But there are those that have been taking these cases to the Court of Appeal and to the Supreme Court and been successful. You might want to get those involved, particularly, I think there's 2 that are appearing in court next Thursday. They're going to start bringing all these cases together at the same day, that they all go to the same solicitor, a protest solicitor, a specialist in that area. And there's a website, an organisation called, I think it's called Green and Black Shield. Yeah? Go there. They've got solicitors that they can recommend to you. They will show you their rights. I think it's based in Manchester. So you can go to their offices and see them and talk to them.
What brings you back to human rights? Can you come down to the mic, please?
I think there's a mic there on that table. We can take you.
What brings you back? What brings you back to human rights?
Yeah.
Now, we were protesting. They've arrested people for obstructing the highway. We weren't obstructing the highway. People still went to work. The lorry drivers were in their place working the lorries. Businesses still operating. They blocked the road. We didn't block the road. So that's how human. We weren't obstructing the highway. So we can arrest us under that.
Well, again, this is that using a law that was not designed for this type of process. It's designed for the miners and brought in under Thatcher to prevent the miners and flying pickets, if you remember those. Using that for you. Now, there's two issues here. The first issue is, are they right in what they say you did? Right? Are they right in saying that you put a chair in front of the gate and prevented a lorry from coming in? All right? You may say, you know what? I didn't do that. That's wrong. And actually, I was standing there, and you nicked me, and you effectively make enough evidence against me, and I didn't do it. That is a trial issue that will be decided by a judge when you present evidence to them. That's the first issue. Second issue is, well, why am I entitled to do this as of my human rights in relation to protest? Well, this is where the tension lies. You have a right to protest. You have a right to stand there and scream your lungs out at anybody, right? You can do that with your signs and with your petitions. But as I say, you don't have a right to pick up the table and smash it over the fence. You don't have the right to break down the fence. And according to this law, you don't have the right to stop normal working place activity with workers going into their work, which is what the allegation is that you're doing, whether they're right or wrong, right? Now that's under that law, and the law's there. The law was made by Parliament, wasn't ever repealed, wasn't ever overturned. It's still there. It's still a criminal offence. Now there are arguments around it. For example, are they workers? If you're an agency worker, are you a worker? If you're a truck driver that doesn't work for them, are you a worker? There's those sort of arguments, but they have to be decided by judges in a court, not right at the beginning by police officers who just want to nick you and put bail conditions on you and prevent you from protesting. You will remember that when this started, the local coppers were great. They were having cups of teas and biscuits until the other lot arrived, and they came in heavy-handed. You're not going to get any sympathy from them. They don't care what you think. They don't care about your rights of protest. They're in there to do one job. One job and all that, stop you. Okay, now this has to be decided in a court of law by reasoned arguments, by your lawyers, saying, well, hold on, A, the first thing, he wasn't doing what you were saying he was doing, well, why can't he do that? There's a tension there between his right to protest and this criminal offence that was made up some years ago.
When the police is talking about Wise Quarry, it's like talking that it's Wise Quarry, it's got human rights, and you just said Wise Quarry is a corporate. Now, this is the police we're talking to. Now, they are viewing Wise Quarry as a person. I've had that talking loads of times.
Yeah.
Wise Quarry is a human. We're humans. We've got human rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the police don't see that. The police have seen Wise Quarry as a human. Now, that's not right, is it?
No, I mean, what they're saying is that employees have a right to go to work. Business people have the right to make money by making sure their establishment works and turns over. That's what they're saying. That's their argument.
Well, that's what I was telling you with my other question. People were still getting work. Lorry drivers were in their place work. Businesses were still flowing until the police blocked the road.
I mean, yeah. But that's something that you have to argue out in court, sadly.
I don't be able to.
Any more questions? Sir?
I was one of the first ones to get arrested, but yet I'm the last one in court. I don't understand that, why.
I don't know either, because, maybe because you're a troublemaker, I don't know. No.
I'm a peaceful one.
Yeah. You know what? Suddenly, it's how the momentum develops. You'll land up on a file on someone's desk, and they don't know what to do and to prosecute you or not to prosecute you. Then someone else is nicked. Then someone else is nicked. And then they say, look, we're going to have to charge these people because everyone's being nicked now. So then you end up being caught because everybody else is doing what you were doing effectively. And so the momentum then builds up and everything sort of comes over. So it may be at the beginning, if you were the only one that was arrested, maybe, I don't know.
Yes, on that day I was, yes.
Yeah, it may be that they may not have prosecuted you if others hadn't later been arrested. They might have thought, well, it's not in the public interest. That reminds me, something else I didn't mention. When you get to the police station, have you heard of a caution? Yeah. A caution is something given to you by a police officer before they decide to charge you. So they can give you an option, not always, they can give you an option to caution you. Now, a couple of things you need to know about a caution. One, it goes on the police record, all right? It's there, all right? So if I did a printout of you and you've got a caution, I'd see it, all right? Number one. Number two, they can only give you a caution if you admit that you committed a criminal offence, all right? That means it's an admission, all right? And then they say, so it's often used as a bit of lever. We won't prosecute you if you admit it, and we'll give you a caution. So just be wary of cautions. It's a way out of it, but at the same time, it means that you've got to admit it. Right, back to you.
They did actually come round to some of our houses the night before and caution us.
Probably not a formal caution. They may have come back.
It was a formal one. They were recording it.
No. We're mixing up terms. As a caution as a sentence, so like a conditional discharge, like a fine, there's a caution as well. So it's a formal term for sentencing, for disposal of a criminal act. What you're describing is them coming round warning you, effectively saying, don't go tomorrow because, or don't do this, or don't do that, we're recording you, we're letting you know. That's a different type of thing.
They didn't read me my rights. They definitely read me my rights, and it was like 9 o'clock at night when they knocked on the door.
I don't know what that is, to be honest. I don't know what they're doing. Well, no, I got that bit. This is all. Let me tell you something. This is all intimidation.
Yeah, that's the way it comes across to me.
This is all intimidation.
Because I was one of
This
the
is all
people
away.
standing there
This is all
refusing to
about
do anything.
stopping you from going on protest. Again, don't break the law from the point of view. Don't cross that line. I say it. But if they are saying things that you haven't done, like putting your chair in front of the gate, and you're nicked, and you've got bail conditions, you're going to be stopping you from protesting, effectively, because that's what your bail conditions say.
Hi.
I'm going to go back to this, you Dennis chap here, because he's had his arm up.
If you have a caution, do you have to declare that on job applications?
There's a thing called the Rehabilitation of Sentencing Act, and under that piece of legislation, it depends upon, generally no, after a certain period, but it depends upon what job you're applying for.
I work in school. So
I was about to say with kids, but it also depends upon what the caution was for. So if the caution was for something to do with kids, then it would be something that you'd have to declare. But
so
the caution,
if I had a caution for protesting, blocking the gates, and I was to apply for a job in a school,
right.
I would not have to declare that caution.
I'm not going. You know what? Without looking through the law and looking through the specific sections, I can't answer that. It would be unfair of me to say yes and then you find out no. I think it's all clear under the law what you can and cannot declare under the Rehabilitation Act. The Act is designed not to discriminate, though. The Act is designed not to ensure that you can't carry on with your life. Yeah. Remember, the caution is the lowest type of sentence that you can receive. So they're far more generous with cautions than anything else. Yeah. For example, declaring them if you're going to travel to America and that sort of stuff. So you're probably on safe ground, but check. The
disclosure and borrowing service certificate,
yeah.
I'd just like to ask, is if you do end up in the magistrate's court,
Yes.
and you feel that you're not guilty regardless of even a conditional discharge,
Yes.
is there room for appeal?
Yes. In the magistrate's court, any criminal offence that you are convicted of, you have by right a right of appeal to the Crown Court. So you and so you have the same trial over again in the Crown Court. So if you think that the local magistrate has got it wrong, then you can go in front of generally Stoke Crown Court or Stafford Crown Court in front of a judge sitting with a magistrate, but it's a judge, and all the barristers their wigs on and whatever, and you can do it that way. So that is your right and your entitlement. And they don't hear about the result in the magistrate's court or the sentence. It starts again, completely fresh.
Can I just ask a question about the police? On the Wednesday, 50 police turned up. Yeah. On the Friday, they left us alone. On the Saturday, 30 police turned up. And since that day, the police have been there every single morning at 6:30 before any protesters can get there. They must be being paid by Red Industries to police that, or are the police using the taxpayers' money to go there at 6:30 every day, even if no one else turns up? Nobody turns up at all. They're still there.
This is not a decision taken in a vacuum, right? I suspect that this is, I don't know, but I suspect that this might be coming from the Police and Crime Commissioner, whose name is Ben Adams. Ben Adams is the person that's in charge of the police force in this country, in this area, effectively. He's a politician, right? He's political. Tory, right? Elected. Tory man in charge of the police here. He's been invited to public meetings, refuses to attend. That is the person, it wouldn't surprise me, was making the decisions as to these police officers coming. This is something that's been taking place at the top there, not down here. So when you hear your local politicians saying, oh, well, we're helping you out, then why is Ben doing this? And why is Ben not standing in front of this and saying this is not on? Because he can make those decisions.
Would it be justified to threaten somebody like me, a migrant, with deportation?
Okay, so when it comes to deportation, are you an EU citizen or outside the EU? So EU citizens have lots of rights, or certainly they did do. Things have slightly changed now, as we've seen. But it's much harder to deport an EU citizen, or certainly was a lot harder. However, we're talking about people getting 2 years or 12 months in custody. We're nowhere near that environment. All right? So I don't think you should worry too much about it. But again, the Green and Black Shield website will deal with that, and it's worth going on to it.
I'm just wondering how long we've got before the new bill comes in, and that'll bring big changes to our right to protest.
Now, that's the other thing that you need to be aware of. The government recognises that in certain communities, protecting statues, which didn't need to be protected in any event, is very important, and that protesting, like the Extinction Rebellion protests that have been going on in London, need to be stopped. So they introduced a law through Parliament that your local politicians voted for and supported and agreed, that gives the Home Secretary the power to stop legitimate protests. So all those rights that we have been fighting for the last 200 years can simply be reversed by the Home Secretary under new powers and new laws. If she considers it, there's a test, I think, considers it to be unruly, I think is a term. It's some soft word that she can decide to what protest isn't unruly, what protest isn't loud. That's the whole point of a protest. So there's concerning new powers And God forbid you've got any stand anywhere near a statue, because you'll have, and I've seen it, you'll have 30 police officers surrounding the statue. But these powers, these laws, are there in place, and they're taking away our rights. They're stripping them away. And remember when I first started, I said that it's a fight that we've been having for many, many years, but you're only impacted when you stand up and you try and do something in your local community like you're doing. Most people go around their lives and are not impacted by any of these laws. It is only when you realise that they're trying to stop you from doing something, and it's you that's being impacted, that you realise these laws are there, and they're creeping in. They're creeping in slowly, and they're taking these rights away that we've been fighting for many years.
What are these conditions? The new conditions?
The new
I know you're not allowed to stop anybody. The old conditions, you're not allowed to stop anybody from going to work. You're not allowed to obstruct.
Yeah.
So what new conditions?
So the new piece of legislation that's gone through Parliament we're talking about, that gives the power. It's a big act, so there's quite a lot to the act. But simply put, it gives the power of the Home Secretary, and I would say that she would devolve those powers to Chief Constables, the right to prevent protests. Now, we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it yet in action, and it was designed specifically for Extinction Rebellion, to be frank, and what they were doing. But they are there, and I haven't seen them introduced, but it will start being introduced. I don't think the legislation has come into force yet. It's gone through Parliament, but I don't think it's actually gone into force. But I can imagine it. I don't think, I will be very surprised if it's a piece of legislation that's used for the protest here at what is Quarry put up. But who knows? Who knows?
As I understand it, as an element of the new legislation is, if Red made a complaint that we were being a nuisance, then the police could come in and arrest us.
They'd have to apply evidence for a nuisance, surely.
Well, this is the thing, because they're using words that are quite low threshold words. What is a nuisance? Someone playing the music next door louder than what we thought they should be playing it is a nuisance. You know, I mean, you're right. The threshold is actually quite high, and this is the worrying thing. This bill went through without, on the nod, effectively.
It's a very worrying piece of legislation.
It is. It is a really worrying piece for those who have been community activists for many years. We just don't know what's going to happen next.
Hello. Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
When people have had the experience that they have had with the police apparently doing wrong things in the wrong order or saying wrong things to them, what's their redress, please? What can they do about it in terms of a complaint?
Right. So if you're found not guilty in a court, so they prosecute you wrongly, they prosecute you maliciously, right? They prosecute you negligently. Then you can have a remedy if you're found not guilty to sue the police. Sue the police for false custody when you went down that police station. Sue the police for malicious prosecution. So there are actions. There are solicitors whose specialism is suing the police, and it's civil action. You get damages for it.
And what about the people who had the visit on the Tuesday before the protest?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Yeah.
Is that what they can complain? And who can they complain to, please?
Well, the same people that are sending the police now. That's your problem, isn't it? I mean, your difficulty is, if the police are policing the police, who do you go to? We've got ombudsman, we've got police, we've got the ombudsman, we've got the police complaints commission authority, but again, years down the road.
It's obviously harassment.
Yeah.
Somebody not before.
Yeah.
So if you do this,
I've seen it happen so many times.
They were provoking us. They were provoking us. Well,
Yeah.
on Wednesday when it turned up with aggression, they were provoking us.
Yeah.
They wanted us to react. On a Saturday, they wanted to protest us. why didn't turn up on Friday? And Bowles on the radio Friday. I don't know why didn't turn up on Friday.
But the question is, this is effectively a peaceful protest outside a landfill.
Yeah,
You're not climbing into an RAF base and damaging a tornado, are you? You're not standing outside of Extinction Rebellion in the middle of Oxford Street, preventing all the traffic going. You're holding a sign up outside a quarry. Why are the police interested in you? You know, and that's where we got the stink from the quarry, but I think something else stinks. Yeah.
It's weird, provoking the community. When someone can get on about it, like the Barrister, what about tours? They went for our addresses, 9 o'clock, the night before protest. Brokers, they turned up in numbers, writing tasers.
How do they get your name and your address?
So how do we
Probably because they've arrested you. Probably because they're filming you. Probably because they're taking pictures of you.
Get your name off social media.
Right.
Just one going on in there, a lot of activists have asked in the past, and obviously it might be a good point for this one, social media, obviously filming police officers, language around police officers, is there any advice for that?
So be respectful, be nice, don't argue back, film them. Film their badge numbers, all right? Take their badge numbers down. Get your cameras out, we've all got them now, film them, put them on Twitter, put them on Facebook, get the message out there. This is what they're doing to us.
Any rights from the Magna Carta, Mark?
Sorry?
Any rights from the Magna Carta?
Afraid not, afraid not. I don't think King John had any rights in the Magna Carta. I don't know.
That's from the car park.
Yeah, no, but we've got what?
Because there is a lot of stuff on the internet regarding Magna Carta and regarding your right to freedom as a freedom and so forth. So can you please look for us?
Yeah, no, it's look, I've seen people say, oh, Magna Carta, judges take no notice of it. Police take no notice of it. But if you point to your European Convention right of Article 11, right to protest, and that the fact that what they're doing is preventing that from happening, then they will take notice of it.
I caution the police officer.
Yeah.
I explained to him the Ziegler and the DPP. And I explained to him that what he's doing is we're doing a lawful protest, a peaceful lawful protest, and what he's doing is an unlawful arrest.
Yeah.
Are you aware of it? He says, I'm aware of the Ziegler versus DPP. I again cautioned him because I did say to him, what you do can be taken down and use a court of law against him. So it felt brilliant.
Talk about me representing you. You should be representing me, yeah. And look, but the fact is, the copper doesn't care. All right, he's just there doing his job, basically, rightly or wrongly, he doesn't care. All right, and he's heard it all before. All right, the person who cares is that judge, that magistrate. That's who cares, and that's where you have the argument. There's no point arguing with the copper. You're not going to win. Oh no, listen, I've cross-examined a few police officers, and you'll be surprised at the limited knowledge they have of the law.
The amount of officers that were on top of me when I was on the floor is disgraceful.
Yeah.
Now, can complaints be made, and who did they be made to about it?
Unreasonable force for arrest. It is. So
because
yes.
I've got army.
So, first of all, was the arrest lawful? If it wasn't, they were acting unlawful and assaulting you.
They damaged my property as well.
If the arrest was lawful, let's say, then did they use unreasonable force on you to arrest you? So there are potential actions against them. And your problem is you've got to get a solicitor interested to take on the case to go and sue them. No, I'm a barrister, so that's fine. Right, one more question.
How is it that when we block out the gates, their security are allowed to come out with dogs, threatening people with dogs? As soon as the wheel across the gate, they come out with the dogs.
Remember that the security personnel have absolutely zero rights of enforcement against you. They are just you in a police show, right? So you can take no notice of what they say. They have no right unless you obviously commit a criminal offence and they can citizens arrest.
But then they come, instead of staying their side of the gate, they come this side of the gate with the dogs.
Well, they do that.
Intimidating people.
Then they can. Then that itself can be an assault.
But when you say anything to the police, they don't see it.
Well, they don't care. The fact is, you're on the wrong side of the fence, and so you're right. But you can report it as a criminal. You're right. But you get the number. You get it has to be recorded, and it has to go on the computer. And so later you can say, right, I did all that, and there it is.
There was one incident where I was standing this side in the lay-by. There was a young policeman next to me. A lorry come up. The guy was driving with one hand, smoking with another. When I said to him, "Isn't that illegal?" he said to me, "What? I didn't see it." He's standing next to me. I saw it.
Yeah.
He didn't see it. Very convenient.
Yeah. But hey, well, I can tell you a few stories. Right. Yes, we all done? Well, thank you for inviting me. And again, anyone, my phone number's open. I only live up the road. If you need any help, you let me know. All right? Thank you.
Contrary to Mark's little introduction earlier, I'm not here representing the council. I'm here as a fellow protester. Many of you know me. I've been on most of the protests. I'm here as a citizen of this borough that's had enough of this stink like the rest of you. So a few of the people on the steering committee have stopped the stink, and a few of me and my fellow councillors that are friends with Mark, we felt it was very important that that people of this borough had some advice. We have wrote to Ben Adams, the Police Fire and Crime Commissioner. I've wrote to him, Councillor Sue Moffat's written to him. We've asked that he come down here to have a public meeting to explain the behaviour of Staffordshire Police, to explain people's rights, and to explain why he thought that that was an appropriate and proportionate response to a lawful protest. Unfortunately, the 3 emails that have been sent, he hasn't agreed to attend to a public meeting. So, observing those protests, we felt a number of us on the council, and there's John and Jill Williams at the back there, fellow councillors as well. The view was that that was not a proportionate response. I've spoken to the police. I've asked them why they felt that 50 officers was appropriate. They said that there was intelligence that there was going to be 450 protesters. I'm not sure whether they were expecting a football gate, but that certainly wasn't the case. In regards to one of the questions earlier from the centre of the floor, I've spoken to Staffordshire Police. I've asked them, are Red Industries paying for the police? They've said no, but they've said that they will be having a response there every day now for the foreseeable future, and that's an operational decision. They were a little unsure when I asked were they available for response, because as taxpayers I think that's very important. Over the past few years, policing in this borough has been absolutely decimated. We haven't got local police officers in Newcastle anymore. All of our police in North Staffordshire start the shift in Hanley, and then they respond from there where the incidents. We haven't got a police station anymore. So I think it's absolutely criminal in itself that our police officers are being used to protect big business and turn themselves on people that are fighting for clean air for our children. I think that's absolutely disgraceful. I think in terms of where we go from here, I think that it's clear that we're being seen as a nuisance. Red Industries are going to put everything that they've got, their money, their influence, to try and stop the protests. Staffordshire Police hope that it would go away. The council haven't got any powers. The council cannot shut that place down. It has no powers. That's the Borough Council. The County Council has no powers. In my humble opinion, the only way that we're going to stop suffering for another 4 years from that place is to get a change in the law. Now, the government have got an 80-seat majority. If they wanted to bring in a bill, like the police and crime sentencing bill that's been referred to, with an 80-seat majority, they could rush that through in 2 weeks. So when Boris Johnson stands up there and laughs and scoffs and promises all alpine fresh air, We should be saying, change the law so that we can shut down pollutants in our community. And that's what we should be demanding. And as someone, as well as a councillor, I'm a firefighter. I work full-time for the Fire Brigade Union, so I'm very much on picket lines and protests in my career. I think what we should be doing now, we should be raising money locally. We need to take this fight from those gates to Westminster. We need to be having a number of coaches, 150, 200 of us, outside Downing Street, saying, you're not listening to us in our little borough of Newcastle under Lyme, but you will listen to us when we're outside this house. That's what we need to do. And the other thing we need to do, and this will take all of us to do it, it can't be done in isolation. We need to declare Newcastle under Lyme as a public health emergency. And as much as I know a little bit about trade union laws, something I would ask Mark about, but I realise he is a criminal barrister, not the questions that I'm about to ask. Would you be able to tell us anything about class actions? Because I think it's time that we now sue the government and we sue the Environment Agency. And I'll say this. A few days ago, I've been handed some evidence that I've never seen anything like it. It's very, very serious. Complaints and evidence that were made of tipping in that site with photographs that have not been investigated and have been dismissed by the Environment Agency. And this is the type of stuff they are being criminally negligent in their handling of that site.
We've got Aaron Brockovich here, class actions, yes. The best firm to deal with this is a firm called Lee Day Solicitors. Now, Lee Day have done a lot of these class actions. They're currently representing a number of groups in relation to suing the government and suing a number of different agencies. The problem is you've got to get them interested. You've got to, because it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of resources. And it's a sort of conditional fee arrangement that they have. So they will take a larger percentage for the upfront risk of putting a whole office and all the staff to suing the government, which can take a year or so. So yes to class action, Lee Day are these solicitors. You've heard of Lee Day.
It's quite ironic, Lee Day are the firm that have just represented the police officers in their pensions fight.
So
basically we haven't got that amount of money. We haven't got.
well, no, they do it free. They do conditional fee arrangement. If there is a case,
Buy now, pay later.
yeah, basically, yeah, no window fee, whatever they call it. Yeah.
Good thing, guys.
All right, now before.
We've got to keep reporting this thing.
Yeah.
We have to, because a lot of people are coming back now saying that they're not even getting the appropriate numbers. Or reporting incidents have been low. We all keep reporting it, but the brother-in-law, he keeps coming back for every day. Have you phoned him? No. I sat him down and tapped it into him. Said, no, ring him. He felt brilliant after he'd done it.
Who set up the Fix My Street app?
Oh,
because none of the reports that went in there have gone to the EA.
Yeah, but it is important, guys, that we do keep reporting it. Let's keep protesting. Let's keep going.
Absolutely. Before we go, the camera here, we're going to do some short clips and we're going to be putting out on Facebook. So can we just take a few of your comments on a one-on-one, maybe a short little interview for 1 second, 1 minute that we can put out there on Twitter and on Facebook, complaining as to why it is necessary that we continue on with the protest. All right. So if you can come up to this camera.
That we keep protesting, whether we're down at the bed offices, whether we're down at the Wallies, or wherever we can do. You know, it's important that we keep reporting it on the 0800 number. And we're having issues with the Fix My Street. We need to get this addressed also. Traffic's in the mornings. 6:30, there's 18 wagons are counting coming in. And it's all the way down the borough. That's the next fight, Andrew, for the borough councillors. Because, you know, it's atrocious. They're using undesignated traffic routes. The traffic routes, am I right in saying it's Downhill Road, the old Surreal Quarry, that used to be there, that travel route. Because they're coming all the way down here, and God knows what time of morning in the afternoons. The kiddies are on there, up near, they're standing next to wagons, and the kiddies are frightened, the parents are frightened.
The park outside St Mary's, down
So I think it's important, Andrew, that you get the local councils together, whether it be Tory, whether it be Liberal, whether it be Labour, like themselves. That needs addressing ASAP, because I can see somebody getting killed, I really can.
You've got about 10 wagons parked up, when the cars are having to go past, you're taking your life in your own hands, trying to get past 10 wagons just to get past.
Well, it's ironic, isn't it, that they're not being accused of obstructing a highway. Well, so let's do some interviews to keep getting the message, and well done everyone for attending. Thank you.